On this week's episode of Whitetail Cribs, we're headed to Western New York to visit with the Murray family. The Murrays have a hunting camp with plenty of hunting tradition and stories that they're going to share with us today. If you guys enjoyed the episode, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Now let's go ahead and get right into the episode.
Hey everyone, I'm Paul Murray from Hunters Creek Outdoors. Welcome to camp. So here, this is our camp. This is where we really learned to hunt. And this is where our bonds come together. This is, I guess, what we've been working for, our whole life. And this is the reason why we're staying here in Western New York. We'll take a look at the garage before we go inside. As you can see, some of the bucks we've killed along the way. All right. This is what we call the locker room. There's a couple of mounts up here that I just want to touch on. This deer head was in our old camp when my dad and my grandfather bought the place, and was one of the few things we actually took from the old camp when we left, or when we got rid of it and built this place. Same thing with this turkey. I love the head on that turkey. I mean, it just looks so real. He's got about 3/4 of an inch of dust on his back, but now, I'll show you guys the best part of the camp. Come on upstairs and you can check out some of the mounts. All right, well, this is where the Hunters Creek Outdoors crew comes on the weekend and when we take that vacation time. As you can see around the room, we've got a bunch of deer heads here. However, my dad, this is Tim Murray, my father, he's got some pretty special deer here on the wall. We're gonna let him talk to you guys about it.
Yeah, every one of those deer on the front wall, the ones here that I've taken, they all have their special story. And I remember taking each one of them like it was yesterday. And I guess we'll start with the one in the corner there. That's the 14-pointer. I shot that in 1979, about 4:45 in the afternoon, after missing a little 4-point at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I kicked myself in the butt all day long. And then he came by, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And it was, like I said, 1979. We didn't hunt out of trees back then. We hunted on the ground. Tree stands were in their infancy. So he came by, and I made a pretty good shot on him. He didn't go 35, 40 yards, and he piled up. But I had him scored about 3 years later, and he gross scored 158.6, and after deductions he was 148.6, so he lost about 10 inches. But other than my children being born, that was probably the highlight of my life. I really got charged up on him. That buck there, the one next to him here, I shot him opening day probably about 6 years ago. Ryan had missed him twice in the morning. And I don't miss. the lower one in the middle of the wall there, I shot him this year, opening day of the firearms season. And it's funny because I told the guys, we had him on trail cam. We had him back behind the camp here in the summer, and we had property about a mile away. And I shot him a mile away from where we had him in the summer, but I told the boys, I want to shoot him because he's a big 8-pointer. Body-wise, that's the biggest deer I ever shot. I didn't weigh him, and I really kind of could kick myself for not weighing him. But I have a picture of me standing next to him, and he's almost twice as long as I'm tall. The one above him, I shot him November the 4th, probably about 15 years ago. Shot him at 8 o'clock, I shot him at 7:15 in the morning, and I knew I didn't make a good hit on him. He stepped right when I released the arrow, and I caught him in the liver with one blade of my broadhead. Well, I could tell by the way he ran away. He was hunched over that it was a poor shot. About 20 minutes later, it started snowing. And I mean flakes as big as silver dollars. So I got down and I walked about 100 yards and I found his bed. It was all full of blood. So from about 7:45 till 1:30 in the afternoon, I caught up with him. And I shot him probably 3.5 miles away from where I hit him in the morning. That's a special deer for me because of the amount of woodsmanship it took me to track him down and hunt him. I mean, I was laying on my stomach in the snow trying to see if I could see any deer runs where he might have went, because all the sign was gone, because we had probably 3.5, 4 inches of snow. The one on top there's an interesting story with that one. We had a doe in heat, and where I was in my stand, they were probably a third of a mile away from us, but I could hear all this crashing in the swamp and buck grunting. And just out of the corner of my eye, I look, and here he comes. And he's heading over towards the swamp. And I was up in a cherry tree, but there were 2 cherry trees right together. So I got my bow like this, and I stuck, there's only a space this far in between the 2 trees. And I stuck my bow between the 2 trees, and I let him walk right in between the 2 trees. And I shot him. He went 70 yards, and he went down. This second buck from the end there, I shot him November the 11th. And I saw a buck a few days before that's probably 160, 170-inch deer. And I'm in my stand, and it's one of those days where it was kind of damp, but it wasn't real cold. So about 8:30, 2 spikes come by me, and I'm saying to myself, well, just not my year this year. Well, there was a yearling doe, was in her first heat, and she was maybe 150 yards on the side of a hill, and she was running around and dancing around. And he must have caught her. He must have caught her scent, because he come crashing out of the swamp, and I saw him at 10 yards, and I was sitting. I couldn't hear him coming because it was damp, you know what I mean? Well, anyways, and as he's right underneath my stand, I mean 2 feet from the base of my tree that my stand's hung, I grabbed my bow, I come to full draw, and I stopped him. He was about 12 yards away, and I hit him quartering away. He circled around, and he bedded down probably 25 yards from me. So I called my son Paul and said, hey, I just stuck a dandy. I'm just going to wait for him to bleed out. Well, about 10 minutes went by, and he let out a really big, loud buck grunt or roar, and he stood up. Took 3 or 4 steps to get back to the swamp, and he laid right down again. Well, he did it again about 10 minutes later, and I said, that's as much as I can stand. I lowered my bow down the tree stand. I climbed down real carefully. I knocked an arrow. And I walked up. There's a big beech tree between him and me, and I walked up to the beech tree, and I drew my bow, and I stepped out from the beech tree. He saw me, and he went to get up, but it was too late. The arrow was already on his way. And the arrow hit him, and his lungs, you could hear the air go right out of his lungs. He went just like that, and he died instantly. That one in the corner there, I shot him opening day of gun season. I saw him archery hunting 3 times. At 7:45 in the morning, going down the same trail, and my archery stand was about 60 yards off the trail. And you can say, well, how come you didn't move your stand? Well, I've shot so many nice deer out of the stand, I didn't want to move it. Well, opening day of gun season, it's 7:45, and he ain't there. And I said, what the heck? He's been pattering and coming down this run all fall long. 10-8, there he was. He was running 5 minutes late. Might have got hung up with one of his girlfriends a little too late that night, and I got him. This buck here, where his tips of his antlers are just about touching him, I shot him out of the same tree I shot that big one. It was just a classic hunt. I saw him twice that fall, but he was too far for a shot. And boy, he presented me a shot at about 10 yards broadside, and he never knew what hit him. Got another deer head right there. That's a special spot and a special meaning for that deer. My best friend, my best hunting buddy in high school, he lost his life in a construction accident when he was 19, and we were just starting to get into archery hunting. And when he died, it left a really big hole in my heart, and we hunted every weekend in the fall. And without him, I had to develop kind of my own path as far as deer hunting is concerned. So I made a commitment that I wanted to try to be as good a deer hunter as I possibly can. This buck here in the corner, I shot him in 1978 on the ground. I was I was running late. I was in the woods, and I try to get in the woods just at pink light. I used to take my knife, my sheath knife out, stick it in a tree, and I'd knock an arrow and hang my bow on a knife, because we didn't hunt in tree stands. So I scuffed the leaves out, and I took a leak. I was running late. Well, that buck heard me scuff them leaves, and heard me urinate, and he thought I was another buck in his area. He come right in, and I shot him at 12 feet facing me, and the arrow buried right to the fletch. The whole arrow was through the center of his body, and he spun around and took off. And he was bleeding internally, but he was only a drop of blood every 10 yards or so, half the size of a dime. But he was piled up probably 110 yards from where I shot him. But like I said, that was in 78, 79. I shot the big one, and I've been trying to go strong ever since. But like I said, this is what we do, and every season. And we hunt deer. Obviously we hunt deer in the fall, but we hunt deer every day of the year. We're planning, scheming, thinking about it. And these deer here in western New York, we don't have the nutrition they have even in Ohio or Missouri or Iowa. But and I've never hunted them, but I can tell you a 5-year-old deer that's 170 in Iowa isn't any smarter than a 130-inch 5-year-old deer here in western New York. Matter of fact, in Iowa, they might not get pressured as hard as they do here in New York. But anyway, so this is our place, and I think it's as nice a place for a hunting camp as you could probably find.
Thanks, guys, for coming out, checking out the Hunters Creek Outdoors Camp.
I don't care where you're going, but whatever you do, you got to get out of here. It's been a long day.